actually have my teacher, Swami Khecaranatha, and he's coming here to talk about his book, The Divine Thread and the Stillness Sutras. So welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to, I've been trying to take some of the practices that you talk about in your book and live them off the cushion. And
Good idea.
I'm having problems. Help me.
No.
Okay. So here's what I'm noticing is one of the parts of this Kundalini practice is to open up your heart. And I ignorantly thought that opening my heart just meant unicorns and puppy dogs. However, there's other stuff like pain and suffering that happens when you open up your heart. And so I'm having a hard time, and I think part of my confusion in what to do now that I've opened my heart and I feel the pain is what to do with that because I have training and background in psychology. There's a whole bunch of spiritual people running around that I've interviewed that have said things, and then there's this practice, and so I'm getting a little bit confused on how to merge all these different modalities into uh, an authentic expression of pain and suffering. But I wanted so that's kind of my background. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about how we both not reject or negate, these are quotes from your book, how we actually go into a practice and not reject or negate either the world or ourselves, including our emotions, thoughts, desires, and stresses, but instead consume or transcend them, and how we can open up to all of life, including feelings of pain, and to balance living fullness of life even in the pain. So that's kind of quotes from your book, and I'm trying to figure out how to live that in practice. So I wanted to start off with pain and hardship, and you described that as grace, which I think is hard for most people to understand. So can we start there and get your thoughts on why is pain and hardship considered grace?
Because look, our life, spiritual life, is about one thing, and that is recognizing the highest within ourselves. Recognizing, if you will, that we are not separate from that highest pure consciousness, from God, if you will, from Shiva, whatever, Allah, whatever the name it is, right? And that is the goal of our spiritual life. It actually is the goal of our life.
Mm-hmm.
It is the purpose of our life. It is the purpose of our existence. And so what happens is that when some, by grace, some knowing, some inner knowing starts to show up and say, you are more than your body. You're more than your mind. You're more than your emotions. I am within you. Come find me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a moment of grace. And in that awakening, in that revelation that starts to take place, part of the uh, understanding that starts to present itself is all of the misunderstandings that we function from, all of the misperceptions, all of the self-serving awareness, and all that pain and suffering is caused by that misunderstanding. Now, this is a little bit of a hard thing for people to accept because they feel like things are happening to them instead of happening from them.
Hmm.
So the point is that when we start to open, we come against what has kept us from opening in the past, or what might be keeping us in from opening, or primarily because we've gone through many difficult experiences without being open.
Mm-hmm.
And so then all this tension is compacted within us.
Mm-hmm.
All these memories, all these vasanas, which means impressions,
Mm-hmm.
are 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 just covering up, covering up, covering up our own awareness. And so
Mm-hmm.
part of the grace, why I say it like that, is that those things are revealed to us. Those limitations are exposed to us as some misunderstanding that caused something to solidify in us.
Mm.
And without really seeing what's limiting the unlimited, or how are you going to find that inner freedom? So
Mm.
when we come up against a difficult situation, right, or we feel some pain, first thing is to not immediately believe, well, this pain is happening because of somebody else or something outside of me. This pain is happening by my own misunderstanding, whether it's now or my previous misunderstanding, right? And so the learning, the growing, is to be able to see through that and to see that pain is caused by misunderstanding in the mind and the ego,
Mm.
which doesn't mean there aren't difficult situations and painful situations, but it's our ability to, if you will, to consume that pain happens, A, because we have an inner practice, but mostly we have an activated consciousness that can see that this, uh, it's like a roadblock, right? So we're traveling around down the road and we're going 70 miles an hour, and all of a sudden, the cops are there and there's a roadblock and we have to stop. And it's that roadblock is preventing the flow of that traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So our own misunderstandings, our own tensions, our own patterns are roadblocks to the flow of our awareness as it tries to expand by that grace.
Mm. Okay.
And so my teacher, Rudy, used to talk about this as test. And the
Mm-hmm.
question for him was everything was a test. The test is, will I be open or will I close to the very dynamic that's presenting itself in my life, not from outside of me, but from within me, to create the possibility for me to transform or to move past or above that situation.
So let me dive into that a little bit. So my own personal situation, and honestly, either I really feel like I'm kind of dense. I probably am dense. I'm literally contracted and dense
Join
with
the human
respect.
race.
Yeah. So the one that it seems like keeps on hitting me over and over in many different forms is death, and so how to and what's so beautiful is that you've shared your own story with your teacher's death and the pain associated with that death. And I
Right.
hear it, I get it, but I don't and in some times when we're sitting through meditation, I can feel the truth of what that death isn't ever a permanent state. It's just,
Yeah.
I can intellectually understand that, but then when the pain hit, it hurts really bad. And so I feel it, and then I don't know whether when, you talk focusing on the joy. Am I focusing on the joy, and these are psychological terms, am I focusing on the joy because I'm in denial of the pain and wanting to, you know, um, fast forward past it?
Right.
And what is the appropriate, whenever you talk to a lot of these spiritual practices and they talk about coming up with how to address your negative emotions, it's about, recognizing, acknowledging that the negative emotion is there, even feeling it, and then letting it go. And so I'm not sure exactly in this model, in this practice that I'm in, how do we, how do you confront your struggles and do so without bypassing them and having our true awareness and possible breaking up of that contraction? How do you do that without fast forwarding past that?
Well, I think I would respond in a few ways. Is that how are you going to not feel your pain?
Is that you were
It
saying?
grabs a hold of you, it starts shaking you around,
Right,
something happens. The pain is there. You don't need to acknowledge it or even say, "Oh, I got to feel this pain." You're feeling it, right?
right, yes.
So it's not a rejection of that or a negation that it's happening, but it is the recognition. Yes, there is I'm feeling this pain. What part of me is feeling that pain? What level of consciousness in me is feeling that pain?
Right.
And
It's my ego. Yeah, it's not necessarily, my
the
higher
level
consciousness.
that feels pain is, and its device is the mental and emotional apparatus, right? And the pain is because we're interacting with that experience in terms of what's going to happen to me.
Mm, mm, mm,
As without getting into the story, that's when my teacher died, and I'm sitting there at 1:30 in the morning, and I realize he's has passed away. The first 30 seconds were nothing has ever, in 1,000 years, I've never felt that much pain,
mm,
right? But I felt it. It had a grip on me. It was like the black demons pulling me down, and I just took a breath and took a breath inside, and all of a sudden, the recognition that, hey, I didn't die, and that he didn't die, even though the body went away.
mm,
And that, in fact, that death for him was the final stage of his life where liberation was possible. And how
mm,
could I feel anything but joy? The pain I was feeling, the sadness, was about me. And that
mm,
doesn't mean it's not real, but pain is the effect of the mental and emotional dynamic at hand, at
mm,
play. And
mm,
so the way you move past it, again, is not to reject it or not to deny that you're dealing with pain, but to tune into a deeper place of consciousness in yourself, and specifically to take the energy of the mind, the energy of the emotions that is rubbing together and causing that pain, taking a breath and taking that energy and that awareness, even that pain, into the psychic body where it can be transformed into a dynamic energy that's in flow.
mm. Okay,
So look,
so
that,
yeah,
go ahead.
no, you had.
So, look, that's, but and the reason we can't get past our pain is that we don't want to get past our pain. We want to reinforce how horrible I feel because I've lost somebody. And that's fine. We lose people and it feels bad. Simultaneous with what's happening is that there's been a freedom happening for that person,
Mm,
and there's a freedom available to us by getting past the physicality of that relationship.
mm-hmm,
Getting past, oh, they're only here because they were physically present.
mm-hmm,
And but the pain comes from the ego and mind and emotions, and if you
mm,
will, from the psychological dynamic that is.
mm. So
The
you
place
don't go, yeah, so you don't go into, oh, you're in denial. Don't go. And so when you're kind of like, oh, I'm trying to go find the joy of freedom that this person never really dies, that inside there's not a loss because I have the fullness of love for this person that died. So, but that feels to me like you're just railroading.
you're railroading what?
You're just going into this form of denial, denying
Well,
the pain.
how are you going to deny pain that's just killing you, right? There's no issue of denying it, but there is the possibility and the potential to recognize that pain is only painful because of our own limited understanding. The Tibetans particularly really focus on the impermanence of life. It's
Mm-hmm.
a major thread that teaches runs through their teaching, right? And they're talking always about, this life is impermanent, and it is, right? Both the people that we love's life and our own life, right? And
Right.
so it's coming to the joy is in the recognition that impermanence is not what is permanent. That which dies always dies, and that which never dies never dies. And so the joy and the liberation is finding that place, even in the face of all that pain. In fact, because of all that pain. So it's not a denial of it, but it is a penetrating through it,
Mm-hmm.
penetrating through actually that vice that we feel in our heart when we have a loss, and just sitting and looking past that and penetrating through it and feeling past and coming in contact with the place in us where there is no loss because there is no separation. There
Mm.
is no sadness because there is joy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a permanent joy that's not conditioned. We're not joyful because we love somebody or we have somebody, right? That's happiness. And happiness is different than joy. Happiness is conditional. I'm happy because I'm looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
When you click the button and I won't be able to see you, I'll be unhappy, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
happiness. It's conditional. Joy is a permanent state of freedom within us.
Mm.
And this is where we started. All of our experiences, all of our experiences, including losing the people that we love, or trying to, or creating from within us the dynamic that propels us to look for that place, no matter what our experience in the world is.
Okay.
That's an extraordinary gift.
So, if I follow the logic correctly, the understanding correctly, is that the pain comes from fundamental misunderstanding. So,
Absolutely.
if I say in a contraction, and embedded in that are memories and impressions, and it's really taking that pain, and you talk about putting it back into the flow, the central channel, which
Right.
is the Sushumna, and 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 either consuming it or surrendering it. And I want to go into a little bit about what that means to either consume or surrender it. You talk about, and for people who aren't familiar with this, a lot of this practice that the non-dual tantric Shaivic practice is focused on the Sushumna, which
Yes.
is the central energy channel, and it's a lot about going inward.
Yes.
Versus some practices are about like, oh, open your heart, go outward like this. This is more of a vertical practice versus a horizontal. So before we go into surrender, can you tell us a little bit about why this practice focuses on the Sushumna, and why is it when you expand, it's not, a lot of spiritual practices are like expand, and you're like, oh, like it's a horizontal expanding. Why it's more of a vertical expansion, and why it's more about going inward versus out.
Well, what I would say is a couple of things is that I wouldn't exactly describe it as something that is just a vertical ascent, right?
Okay.
What there is there's a vertical ascent of this Kundalini force that has given us life through the Sushumna, all right, rising back through our psychic body to its source, which is consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
While that's happening, there is an expansion of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
As this Kundalini is awakened is liberated, then our own limited understanding, our own limited consciousness is expanded from limited individual consciousness to unlimited universal consciousness. So there is an opening, but we're not spiritual pigeons. We're not flying out, and just, oh, everything is groovy, and
Mm-hmm.
that we're finding that experience in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason that practices that focus on that non-dual practices, of which most of them focus
I'm sorry.
on
Can
the
you?
Sushumna
Sorry.
focus
You.
is that
Okay. Sorry. You faded out. Sorry. Anytime I go like this, it's your voice is fading out.
okay. The reason that practices such as mine, the reason that non-dual tantric practices, inherently that means there's a focus on the psychic body, on the
Mm-hmm.
chakras and the Sushumna.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. That your psychic body and the awareness and the impediments that are built up within it are what's travel from lifetime to lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Your mind and your emotions and your physical body fall away. So as we're reincarnated, if you will, then we have lots of the sushumna is compacted. There's lots of debris there, right? And so some vasanas, what are called impressions from previous life, do come into this,
Mm.
right? And so, but the thing that's important to understand is the reason when I talk about internalizing and creating that flow into the psychic body is that that psychic body, the sushumna, is the pathway from limited consciousness to unlimited consciousness. But as I said, it's not just a vertical ascent,
Mm.
it is a vertical ascent that creates an expanded awareness. And what's
Mm.
happening is as this energy rises in us, consciousness expands. What are we talking about when we talk about expansion of consciousness? Individual misunderstood standing consciousness to a universal consciousness. Our own awareness is transformed from our limited mind, our limited emotions, the ego, and its limited capacity to truly understand life and particularly the source of life.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying the
And
difference between, because, so in many yoga practices, you go to a yoga class per se, and they're like, open up your energy and expand. But it's not necessarily, at least my own experience when the teacher is talking about it, it's not about coming from the center and moving from limited to unlimited. It's more kind of like pushing yourself out, like in this kind of willful. I don't know
well,
if that's my,
and
maybe it's my misinterpretation of it.
there's primarily there's a physicality to that. They're talking about really expanding your energy, and that's really when we're talking about the prana kundalini. Then that is the life, the physical life force, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're opening that, and that's a good thing to do, right?
Right.
Really the most authentic, even hatha yoga practices, use that to lead to an inner awareness that we then seek to expand, right? But what I want to say is that when we talk about opening the heart, we're not talking about our emotional heart. We're talking about the heart chakra, which is our doorway into God's heart. They're not different. It's just that we feel it in ourselves first. And that's where that fully present fullness is there. That fully present joy is in our heart
Mm-hmm.
because it's really being nourished, it's being fueled by, if you will, that supreme heart, that pure place of joy. So that's why I perpetually say to people, open your heart. And I don't mean open my heart and make myself vulnerable. Vulnerability is an emotional dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there may or may not be places for that. I'm not really saying that, but I just want to be clear when I talk about saying open the heart, right? That heart that you're opening there by opening into the psychic body and truly feeling your own center. There's no emotion there.
Mm-hmm.
There's no emotion there. There is simpleness. There's a fullness, and within that, the capacity to perceive and understand what's happening to us and what's happening around us from a place that's not emotional, that's not psychological, that's not mental, right? And that's not based on condition. It is
Mm-hmm.
a state of openness that it's unconditioned.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's why from that place you can consume the conditioned experience.
Ah, okay. And so, I'm feeling sadness, tears are pouring down my face. I'm
Right.
feeling, oh, I miss my dad. Okay, these are things that have happened during my meditation. So
Sure.
consuming it would be not negating the pain, or, I'm feeling the pain, right? I'm feeling
Right.
the pain of the thoughts and the misunderstanding. But consuming it looks like what then? Is it just tuning inward and throwing those ideas and thoughts and tears into the center? What does it look like?
Well, it looks more like not doing anything with those things
Okay.
and just looking deeper, looking where we haven't looked before, looking past, if you will, right? That mental and emotional dynamic that's taking place, the sadness that's taking place,
Mm-hmm.
and looking for a place that is not affected, that those experiences that we're trying to get past didn't come from that place. So
Okay.
look, it's a little bit like mining, right? You start digging in the outer crust and you dig and you dig and you dig and you're looking for diamonds or you're looking for a gold strain, right? And all the stuff that you have to chip through, you just chip through it. You don't get caught in it, right?
Okay.
Well, and so by understanding that our mental and emotional dynamics are a limited capacity to understand, then we can just get quiet and just look past them. And in the process of looking past, you're going to see them and they're going to rear their head and they're going to turn into every kind of demon and beautiful seductress, et cetera, to grab your attention.
Mm-hmm.
The place that you're trying to find, CJ, is in consciousness and not in a consciousness that's deeper than mental and emotional construct.
Okay, so the only thing to do is to try to find that place deeper and deeper, going past all the noise and all the signs that say, "Look at me, time to get off." It's like to tune
You
in,
want to drive from
going
here
in.
to Sacramento, right?
Right.
Here I'm Berkeley. I want to go to Sacramento. I get on the highway. I got to pay attention to the highway, but I don't have to pay attention to all the billboards and all this, and I don't have to get off every 20 miles and have a coochie coo and have a shake and this thing and all the stuff.
You wouldn't like traveling with us, with our
Yeah,
family, but
right.
so you're basically saying tuning in until you find like, there's this space inside of me where there's just quiet and stillness and let go of but what about this and how about this and oh, I've got this meaning making thing, or I recognize this about this, whatever. It's just let it
Exactly.
go. But
Yeah.
then here's the thing, that maybe this is my misunderstanding or contraction, is I feel like I'm missing some point experience is about. It's about, so if there's kind of aha or an insight, um, do you still get those when you're tuning deep inside of those?
Of course, but the aha is that all that mental dynamic, all that noise, all that drama and all that push and all that fight, the aha was that is coming from a limited place in you.
Okay, so
And
it's always the same aha.
it's the same aha. The difference is we're not trying to get the aha from when life is beating the hell out of us, right? We get quiet when life is beating the hell out of us, and we start to understand two things. That is not happening to us. It is happening from within us. Our own consciousness creates the field of our life for the very purpose of revealing to us our misunderstanding about our life, about who we really are.
Okay, got it. So this is a very different. So the aha is always the same. It's, I'm all this pain, all this misery, all this felt pain, crying, thoughts that are not super helpful. It's all, those are all potential exits on the highway to Sacramento, and to
You
just
can think
focus
of
on
it like that.
Sacramento. So
That's
then when
right.
you're in Sacramento, you think that's really the place to be.
That, that's right. And in that, there is no denying that there were exits along the highway, right? There's no denying that we are we have we are human, and that in that humanity there is emotional and mental construct. What I try to suggest to people they understand is do not let your humanity prevents you from understanding your divinity.
Mm. Mm.
And
Okay.
spiritual life is about coming to understand our own divinity.
Mm. So
And
go.
in that process, there is never a negation or a rejection of that humanity. In fact, when we come in contact with that divinity, then our humanity is now filled and expressed from a much more profound place.
Mm. Mm.
And that place is called unconditionality.
Mm. So when you talk about consuming versus surrender, so what I'm hearing, like I understand the analogy of there's lots of exits on the highway, so don't get confused. I understand that to me that feels like surrender. What does consuming your energy mean?
Well, think of it like this. Let's say a blizzard comes and it's 20 below in Seattle,
Hmm.
and you have a nice fireplace there, and you have some logs sitting on the side of the fireplace. How warm are they going to make you? It's when you put them into the fireplace and you consume them, you light them on fire, and so this this energy that's in inertia in that log, the energy that is built into that log and it is released as heat when you put the heat to it, when you put
Hmm.
the fire to it, warms you up.
Hmm.
So you're taking density and putting it into flow so that it can express, in that case, heat. It's not the fire, it's the heat that you're after, right? But if you sit
Mm-hmm.
there and stare at those logs and say, boy, wouldn't it be nice to be warm, and I know that if I put those logs in the fire and I light them, that it's going to warm me up, and you don't do it, you're just going to freeze your ass off.
Okay, so how about
So
if
that's
like,
that's the difference between consuming,
okay.
right? That is consuming. You are transforming energy that's not in motion to energy that's in motion.
Okay, so let's say that I have some, I'm angry, I'm pissed off, I have like all these like
So that's a
ugly
log.
toxic, yeah,
That's a
toxic
log.
log. Okay. So you're
That,
saying
that's a log.
take those logs and then put them back inside into me and just allow them to be burned up by.
But consciously, you're consciously transforming. You're putting them into the flow. You're bringing them into the heart. You're using your double breath, if you will. You're feeling the energy expand into the navel and trying to create this flow that I'm telling you about, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
you're taking that density of emotion, that density of mind, that density of some trauma, and you are putting it into flow, therefore releasing the energy that is inherent within it and that's expressing itself as a contracted state and now can express itself as an uncontracted state.
So if I am aware enough of the thoughts or can be still enough to go inside to feel the stillness and go past all the distractions. There are two different routes to the same place of taking this misunderstanding that I'm bumping up against
Yes.
and either burning it up or just not
If
focusing on
if
it.
you can just become still and recognize all those thoughts and all those emotions and all that pain that you're feeling is simply, a particular dimension of yourself, and you can find that place underneath that we were talking about, then you just surrender it. It does the same thing. It takes that contracted awareness and allows it to uncontract, right? So if you can't really, if you try to surrender, then you sit down, you do your meditation, you take a breath inside, you do the double breath, and then you just are aware that you've digested something. You're consciously digesting it, but you're then consciously using your own enzyme system, which is your own flow, to burn it up.
Okay. Okay. And then there's this idea that I've heard also where you said, well, I'm not doing anything anyways. Like this whole thing is a little bit of a, like, it's really Shiva doing all of this. The
Yeah,
energy
but
is doing the.
the only way you're going to know that is by by doing. When we talked about it in, say, in the Monday night classes, the Navapaya, which just I'm making an effort. I'm putting it inside. I'm holding it. I'm breathing it. I'm burning it down. That's enough. That's if you have to do that, right, in order to finally come to understand that yes, all of that's happening, but that's all happening as part of pure supreme consciousness. Your individual experience is not different than supreme consciousness. It's happening in that field.
So if I didn't do anything, if I didn't throw all this logs and do any of these things, would this energy still be doing me regardless? I mean, this is just more for my understanding that my practice, my exercising the muscle of my attention and focus actually does something. Is that the only thing
It does something because that's the level of understanding that you have in yourself. And so that's why a Navapaya, the path of effort, and even the surrendering to the Shakti are dualistic things. I'm doing this. I'm surrendering this. I'm creating a flow. I'm opening
right?
my heart. When you've done that long enough, you realize that it was Shiva doing it as you.
I see. Okay, so it was Shiva doing as me, but it's not as if I don't do anything, it's not like an
If you
autonomous.
don't do anything, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, like it's not like breathing. Like it's happening all together, regardless of whether I'm putting in the effort
It's
or not.
always a conscious process. There's
Okay.
no automaticness happening to it. Right.
Okay. I misunderstood when you were like, it's doing you, don't have to worry about it. It's like, well, then why am I even doing this in the first place if I don't have to do anything? You're
Yeah.
saying it's Shiva doing. When you're doing any of this, it's Shiva doing it anyways.
As you, and then as you come to understand and truly have that experience, that you are it's Shiva doing as you, then at some point, if you stay with that long enough, it's just Shiva. There's no you in the process.
I'm not there yet, but I understand conceptually
And that's okay. Yeah.
what you're saying. Okay. Thank you so much. We've been talking to Swami Khecaranatha about his book, The Divine Thread, The Stillness Sutras. It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.